Imagine, if you will, an intrepid female archaeologist on the trail of an ancient relic that consumed her father's life. Throw in adventure, suspense, and thrills, and what do you got?
Tomb Raider?
Thankfully not, but we did see As Above, So Below. Hit that music!
Movies, music, story times, all kinds of shit for you. Everything goes in its house and out from
So yeah, you pointed out that this was basically a good version of a Tomb Raider movie.
Yeah.
And I initially pitched this to you as a horror movie mixed with an Indiana Jones movie. So it kind of makes sense
fitting,
that Tomb Raider thing comes into play. But yeah, man, we recently watched As Above, So Below, which I think we'll agree right here, right off the top, that this should be a classic.
Yeah.
At the very least, to horror fans, or at the very least, a cult classic. It's got to be a classic somewhere, because this is a thrilling, suspenseful little number. Now, it's got a few things going against it, and I don't mean that as a product. I mean that the very fact that this movie is a found footage movie immediately turns like 50% of the audience against it.
Most people are going to be like, I get sick.
Yeah. And this has a lot to do with the response that movies like Blair Witch Project and Paranormal Activity had. They were these massive financial successes, but then somehow, after millions of dollars were poured into the box office to go see them, there was all of a sudden this entire group of people that were like, oh, that's not scary. That's a piece of shit.
Like the horror hipsters.
Yeah. And I don't understand that concept. It's almost like the horror community is adverse to the idea
of success,
that found footage should have success. Yeah.
Or just in general, anything that's successful, it's like,
yeah, that's true. That's true. And the thing is, found footage is not a new subgenre. It's been around for quite a fucking while. Man Bites Dog, Cannibal Holocaust, two fucking classics, gruesome classics no less, in that particular genre. But it was really the fault, if you want to put blame on anything, of a little flick called The Blair Witch Project back in the late 90s. And I gotta say, I was kind of on that boat. I gotta admit it. I saw it the first time because I had to, because I'm a horror fan. And my initial response the first time I saw The Blair Witch Project was, I don't get it. I don't understand why people are scared. I don't understand why people like this. Now, the scared part, I mean, that's just subjective. I was so jaded by then with horror that nothing really scared me in that regard. But really, just as a whole, I was like, well, I don't understand why anybody would be scared.
Why
by
is this movie the success?
And then on top of that, I was like, to put in the words of our sometimes collaborator, Senor Spielbergo, I could have made this in my backyard. But the thing is, I couldn't have made that.
He's dead, by the way.
I couldn't have made that in my backyard. The truth is that upon re-exploring Blair Witch Project, I began to see its positive properties, and I began to see why it was a good film. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a great fanatic of the Blair Witch Project, but I do understand now why it set a good precedent for what was to come. And I think that found footage film has evolved and improved as time has gone on. You know, I've seen plenty of classics up to this point in that subgenre, and it's usually restricted to horror. I mean, that's kind of like the big conceit.
Or sci-fi.
But yeah, there are plenty of good examples at this point of great found footage horror. So, that being said, I actually saw this film before you, and I saw 3 films at the same time, basically back to back. Another one being a found footage horror, and that's the recent Blair Witch movie, which was also pretty great. But I decided to show you this one because I thought there's no way he's not gonna like this one. It's just got so much to like in it, and it's so distinctly different from the standard horror offering. You know, in the sense that, as we kind of prefaced here, it's an adventure film. It's a mystery film, and yes, it has elements of an exploration film. You know, like or even a action film in the vein of something like The Descent. You know, where the horror elements are still there. But yeah, it's so much more, and it's so unique in its delivery that it had stood out from the pack, and it's the first one I had to show you for that specific reason. Now, the people behind this film are a couple of brothers called the Dowdle brothers, who had previously made a found footage horror film that I absolutely loved, and that was the Poughkeepsie tapes, which never fucking came out in the theaters. I remember seeing the fucking trailer to this thing and going, oh, that looks very interesting. This looks pretty damn interesting. I want to see that when it comes out. And it's one of those things where later you're just sitting there and you go,
oh yeah, that thing happened.
Yeah. And then you're like, huh, let me go find out. Clickety clack clack on your humongous keyboard.
Yep.
Oh, what the fuck? It never came out. It just got shelved, and it just continued to be shelved to the point where the brothers decided to leak it. And the only way you could see this was by downloading it through some illegal means and seeing it, which I did. And
hashtag back to jail.
Yeah, back to jail. But the good thing is that the Poughkeepsie tapes has finally been released on DVD and Blu-ray, so you can actually see it now. But it was an excellent example of what these guys could do, in the sense that it was not only like As Above, So Below, a found footage film, but it was a unique way to present a found footage film. The Poughkeepsie tapes was basically a documentary style, kind of like Dateline special type of delivery package with interspliced footage found from a serial killer in it. And they kind of amped up the anticipation to those cutaway scenes, and those cutaway scenes to the found footage of the serial killer were genuinely disturbing. And it was just one of those films that really stuck with me. Very little flaws in it. Absolutely loved it. I was looking forward to seeing more from these guys. These guys eventually went on to remake one of the greater found footage films, one from Spain called Record, REC. And that's one of the greatest ones. But it was kind of one of those remakes where you're like, man, kind of like Psycho remake, where you're like, this is good,
what's the point?
But yeah, we already have something great over here.
Yeah, I do remember watching Record and then Quarantine coming out. We're being like, we'll skip it.
Yeah.
Because the original was so good.
Yeah, but that's not to say, I mean, obviously got to have jobs, so they took that job, and later they wanted to do Devil. Later they went on to do Devil with M. Night Shyamalan producing, but then they returned to the fold that kind of made them a name, and that is the found footage horror film here with As Above, So Below. The concept is somewhat simple. As I said, it's a young archaeologist picking up her father's work, The Search for the Philosopher's Stone. So immediately we're immersed in a history that is rooted in actual history about the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, this alchemical MacGuffin, if you will, that she will be chasing throughout. And after she begins to find clues, she recruits the team that will take her into the presumed location of this stone, which lies in the catacombs of Paris. Which, if you're not familiar with them, go check out that video on YouTube of that guy that got fucking lost down there, fucking shipped.
It's pretty much horror.
Don't want to go there.
The place.
Yeah, man.
And this is where I don't know if I should interrupt you now, but I will.
Mm-hmm.
This is where stuff started to remind me of the Tomb Raider reboot, in that a young girl,
the video game, of course,
taking over her father's, original quest that was failed, having to find it, being obsessed with it, going into something deeper that she did not see coming, and then recruiting a small team. It's very much the reboot, the Tomb Raider reboot, and that's a good thing, because that reboot is really good.
Yeah.
And it doesn't extend to just the basic layout of the story. It actually kind of goes into the way she acts, the way she kind of like, as she becomes more, I will say that Lara is a little more apprehensive. Like, she doesn't want to go into stuff, but once she's in there and she has to figure out puzzles, she somehow is very much like the character in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Which it was a cool thing to see a movie capture that. I don't know if it was before the movie or not, but capture something that I really liked in Tomb Raider game better than the movie did.
Yeah. So, yeah, man, if you were disappointed by the Tomb Raider movie,
you should probably watch this.
This is an adequate fucking replacement if there ever was one. or not even adequate. This is a badass replacement.
With
But yeah,
more
you're,
horror themes, of course.
yeah, and you're absolutely right in the sense that this is a very much a puzzle movie up until a certain point where it becomes a descent into literal hell. Literal supernatural elements come into play. But yeah, man, in that sense, it is very unique. You know, that we are literally immersed into her world. And that's the thing about found footage films that I figured out when I re-examined Blair Witch Project, the original. I was like, this is why found footage films can be so rich.
Yeah.
And
it's
it's
basically
that
dropping you into a
Yeah.
world of someone who is
Yeah.
already obsessed with something.
yeah,
And you just kind of seeing what they're...
it's
going through.
it's a VR experience basically
Yeah,
that you're
pretty much.
watching. And when they get that formula right, it can be super engaging, man. And you know, and it's a hard formula to get right. That's the thing. And people forget that. They tend to look at the shitty films and go, "Well, look at all that garbage." But when they get it right, it is immersive, and that's exactly what they do. They put you in the thick of this. And on top of that, the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone and her pursuit of it is so interesting that you want to see it. You're kind of apprehensive, as you would be if you were one of her team, because she's so driven. But that part of you wants to see it, wants to know if it's real, wants her to find it. So yeah, long story short, she makes it into the catacombs, and eventually it becomes evident that they have crossed the threshold into something else, because the entire process of finding this Philosopher's Stone is literally a process of purification, or as the film puts it, rectification. And how do they do that? By literally traversing into hell. And here's where it becomes supernatural, and we're going to talk about what breaks this little fucking movie up and makes it great. The characters is the first thing off the bat, and the actors portraying them. We already said that this chick is Perdita Weeks is playing the lead character, and she's pretty fantastic. At least I think so. She really gets you into the spirit of the hunt.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great, but I think the entire crew was really top fucking notch. I mean, they really played it up exceptionally well here.
This genre is one that one guy, I'm not gonna say can ruin a movie, but can kind of hamper your enjoyment of something.
Yeah.
Like if there's one dude who sucks massive dingalings, it's gonna break the immersion a little.
Yeah, and thankfully that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
here.
it doesn't happen here, which is pretty good.
Yeah,
Really good, I'll say.
And a good example is the Dowdle Brothers' first found footage film, which I mentioned already, the Poughkeepsie tapes. There was one fucking guy in that movie, and
sucks.
thankfully he's not in the found footage segments. He's in the documentary part.
So yeah, so you can kind of
get away from it. But that fucking one guy, you want to punch him in the face because he's not. He takes you out of it. Yeah. But everybody in this is top fucking notch, man. And I absolutely loved the cast in this. They really allowed you to not only feel the apprehension and the kind of claustrophobia of their surroundings, especially when the documentarian gets stuck in the bone tunnel. You feel the fucking guy's desperation.
Yeah.
You're like, fuck. And the more he panics, the more you want to strangle him. But at the same time, you're like, I understand, man. If I was in that fucking tiny little bone tunnel, my fat ass would be squirming.
I do kind of like how he was totally fine going down into the catacombs and doing all this shit, but seeing a bone tunnel and a little rat freaked him out.
But
that's kind of that's how you would
I mean, that's just
some people are like that.
Super relatable. I mean, fuck.
Like you can show me a roach and I'm like, hell no.
Yeah. But yeah, man, I thought the cast was great. A particular favorite of mine, besides our lead character, is the French actor portraying. At least I believe he was French. Playing the guy that guides them into the tunnel, and that's
pretty great.
Papillon. He was pretty awesome. But everybody, across the board is pretty fucking fantastic. So that's a 2 thumbs up. Now let's move on to the action here. And in a horror movie, action means kind of set pieces, horror set pieces. And really in this one, we do get kind of a suspenseful set pieces.
Yeah.
Before we get to the horror. So what did you think about the suspenseful pieces where they encountered the elements in these tunnels?
I thought it was smart to do it that way, to have smaller, more suspenseful, more character-driven horror set pieces, because it lulls you into thinking where the movie's gonna go.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of like, okay, we're gonna see a guy freak out in a bone tunnel, relatable, really well done, but that's what I'm gonna expect the rest of this movie. People freaking out over their own, fears.
Which would be a standard in a film like this.
And it would be great. But no, somewhere along like half. I don't know if it was halfway. But let's just say halfway through the movie, they turn it around and make it into actual horror set pieces. That being said, the build up to that turnaround was really well done because it does bring you into that state of mind. Like, okay, this is what I'm gonna see.
And this is also another. I'm glad you pointed it out because this is another positive to this film in the sense that it strays from the standard formula, because usually it's in found footage films, it's a lot of fake outs and or a lot of suspense building, and then there's just one big payoff at the end, and that's it. And a lot of people find that, they're adverse to that. They're like, we sat through 2 hours basically just for one thing.
Or in Blair Witch's case, nothing really.
Yeah. Now I am fond of that because if you ratchet up that tension just right, it can pay off wonderfully. Phoenix Forgotten is a great example of that. It's a great payoff, great characters, great build up, excellent payoff. But this film does something different. It builds up the suspense with these mini hurdles that they have to cross, real world problems that they would encounter in these situations and environments, and then it flips the switch about halfway through, and from that point forward, it's payoff after payoff after payoff that builds up on itself into a different kind of supernatural scenario. And that was unique on its own, and that was super fucking great. So let's talk about that supernatural set pieces, the horror set pieces. What's your overall takeaway from those?
I think when the switch happens, it like you say, it's back to back. And that can be risky. That can reach a point where you're just kind of like, all right, get to the place, right? Mm-hmm. Thankfully, it doesn't here because it does raise the stakes in interesting ways every time. And you get some unique looking shit, like weird freaking rock monsters and weird hooded guys and mouth floors and shit. So it at least keeps it interesting visually. And again, raises the stakes and develops the character. So it's not just there to be spooks.
Yeah, what I found to be the greatest part of the horror set pieces, once they cross the threshold into hell, first of all, the build up to that is awesome.
Yeah, and then the slow realization, like, oh, this is, we have to keep going.
As the characters become very aware of, one, what they have to do to get out, and two, where they are exactly, even though you know instinctually, of course, you kind of come into that realization and realize and kind of accept their fate in a manner of speaking.
Yeah.
And that's just testament to how great the characters were built up to that point, and the way hell itself victimizes them according to their guilt or their sins individually.
Yeah, and it starts off slowly.
Yeah.
To a point where you're kind of like, you know what it is, but the characters themselves are kind of like questioning it.
Yeah.
But then it ratchets up to a point where you're like, okay,
yeah. And then of course, once the machinations of hell to set them off their path or drag them away don't work anymore, then we get the actual supernatural hard-on elements, like you said, the stone creatures, the demonic hooded creatures, just the weird visuals. Mm. It just goes into this chaotic disarray that was very reminiscent of like kind of Fulci's The Beyond in a lot of ways, and it blurred the line between the supernatural and the natural, and that is I love when the movie does that, So that's what I loved absolutely about those horror set pieces. The score in this, we'll mention this real quick. There is no score, and this is
score is basically sound effects.
This is kind of typical of found footage horror films to some degree, but these people, the sound design in this is so good that it ratchets up the suspense just as well as the visuals do and what's going on. It is an exceptionally well designed audioscape, let's call it that. And once they get to a certain point in hell, there is this chanting sound that comes naturally from somewhere in the depths of hell that just accompanies what's going on and makes everything all the more haunting. But it's not a score, it's just the aural landscape, and the sound design in this is wonderful. I loved it. I'm sure you'll agree with me on that. The visual aesthetic of this is what you would typically expect of a found footage film, but with very good production values.
Yeah, and they do explain the reason why it looks so good.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So that's all good, well and dandy. The final thing we want to touch upon are the effects, which I frankly thought were wonderful. And there are plenty of effects, which is, again, very unusual for a found footage film, especially when hell becomes much more upfront about what it is, And
before that, you do get some death scenes.
Some cool death scenes. Very realistic. We don't go overboard with some, crazy crag gore and shit like that.
Some dude smashing a chick's face, which looked pretty convincing. Some guy falling. And then, of course, you get into the hellscapes where you're like, well, this is pretty neat looking.
Yeah, very haunting. Awesome work on the set designs and environments they used. Really gets you into where they're at and the mood. Top notch, I'd say. So across the board, I think we are pretty enthusiastic about this film. I'm glad you liked it. It's always kind of like a trepidatious feeling when I like something and I'm like, man, I hope somebody else likes it. So,
this was a movie I was interested in watching for a while. But the old Guardian sucks and donkey nuts sometimes.
But now you know, and it's good. So check it out, guys. As above, so below. We deem this a classic. Give this a final thoughts and rating on a scale of 1 through 10.
Thoughts pretty damn great. It's pretty high up there with my favorite found footage films. In fact, I'll take a risk and say it's probably my favorite right now because of how unique it is, in that it takes what you expect and kind of flips it and actually really does deliver for the first time. Other movies deliver and it's satisfying, but this one kind of like delivers and it keeps delivering. You're like, oh shit. Okay, they didn't shy away from that. Usually you can see the found footage thing as a crutch for not showing effects, and here they do. So it's not that, it's just that they had a unique idea and wanted to put it this way. So that's cool. I was expecting, again, this is another thing that it kind of flipped on me, but I was expecting a more downer ending. And I kind of would have liked that because I'm a fool for that. That being said, the message and the story kind of dictated that ending, so it was fine. Yeah. I would have liked it, but, okay, cool. It makes sense, and so that's cool. My rating will be a freaking 9.5 on the found footage horror scale, I guess. It's pretty damn great. Should be a classic.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, man. I'm going to give it a 9.52. It is probably my favorite found footage film up to this point. And I love plenty of them, so that goes to say something. I absolutely loved it. Very unique approach. I'm with you too. I love a downer ending, but I think this absolutely benefited from the not so downer ending because it completed the journey that this chick was on, and it went hand in hand with what the Mystery of the Philosopher's Stone dictated. So it was fulfilling in that sense, very much so. And like you said, unique, because usually we don't get it's not a happy. Don't get me wrong, it's not a happy ending.
No,
but it's not the downer ending you would expect.
You usually get a camera falling, you assume everybody's dead, and then fuzziness or whatever.
But man, awesome. I did love that they didn't do the shaky cam thing 24/7.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, that's very useful sometimes in films like these, but sometimes it can be overused, and they didn't do that here. It's very tactfully done. I love it, man. Check this film out. Tell us what you think. Hit like, share, and subscribe, and those notification buttons, because we're out.
Bass music, stupid sounds, all kinds of shit for you. Anything goes inside and out, don't couple corpulent dudes. Bass music, stupid sounds, all kinds of shit for you.